Good morning, Gen Rinpoche. Thank you for these precious teachings. And good morning, Katrina. Oh, let's go live. Good morning, Gen Rinpoche. Thank you for teaching us this precious text. And good morning, Katrina. Thank you for translating this precious text. And welcome to all our online participants. We're happy you can join us. And we'll begin with a few preliminary prayers. And you'll find the link for those prayers in the chat box.
To the teacher endowed, transcendent destroyer, one thus gone, foe destroyer, completely and fully awakened one, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, one not to bliss, nor the world's supreme guide of beings to be tamed. Teacher of gods and humans, to you, the Buddha endowed, transcendent destroyer, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni, are prostrate, make offerings and go for refuge. When, O supreme among humans, you are born on this earth, you passive and strive and said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise than I bow, with pure bodies formed supremely fine, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the three worlds, winner of the best supreme guide, to you I bow. With the supreme signs, face like the spotless moon, color like gold, to you I bow. You are immaculate, the three worlds are not incomparable, wise one, to you I bow. Great, compassionate, protector, all-knowing teacher, field of merit and good qualities, vast as an ocean, to Thabkhe I bow. Through purity, freeing from attachment, through virtue, freeing from the lower realms. Unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. Having freed themselves, showing the path to freedom too, well established in the trainings. The holy field endowed with good qualities, to the Sangha I bow. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind completely, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a mirage, a flame, a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, a bubble. A dream, a flash, a lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit may sentient beings attain the state of all-seeing, subdue the foe of false, and be delivered from the ocean of cyclic existence perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, four lands, sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you, may all beings enjoy this pure land. Venerable holy gurus, in the space of your truth body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, let fall the rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Idam Guru Ramna Mandalakam Niryatayami. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the the Dharma and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
다 딕송겐라.
그거면 돼 야오치. 아,
그저께 준주라면 그거게. 예침부도.
가르사.
예침부도.
기랑기 송게 전부도 거기도
어야 안 되셔. 어야. 다 돼야. Geshe 전부 시월에 송래로와. 간라 섬기 담바른 제데스. 기부 총우다. 기부 쟁게 삼로 차네. 니 기부 쳔비 로 차네 찬주 심 랑게 큐레 예베 기부 강텔라스 거라. 간라 섬기 담바른 제데스 섬기 담바른 제데스 찬주 섬데스 거라. 간라 섬기 담바른 제데스. 예바테 콜레샤 테부 찬주 섬 큐레 켄겐게 가사 텔리아트니 차세스고라 구슨 쿠바네 차세스 갈라 네바체자 테드와세 찬주 섬데랑 큐레 케바이나 네 가사 텔레 미셰치 수 네바체바이나야 대단 드네 파네레 메지바 마세 마오바나 텔레아 펜바체토바 쇼스 몰람 켐네 대단 드네 고 su never get the pa pendo cheto years mora, Kala never cheja tendrewas. Never chebated, su never chegi unaya. Chanju sim kebe casa de pa. And then Yamao bana call it the pant over your shows, Molam cheba. They don't drill nes ora. Su never get the coranda to the basara. They don't drill a chanju somebody part, ne? Molam damni. 대화단 대화 연구를 마도 파트니 동에게 종에게 내지 말해서라 간라 네버체게 되더 대변 종내 들어 겹수치스 대변 종내 전주 심세를 차살로 겹수치스도야
So, to begin with, from the great Bodhisattva Shantideva, he says in his Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, to them in whom this precious jewel of mind is born, to them I bow. I go for refuge to these springs of happiness who bring their very enemies to perfect bliss. So here, someone who has prior trained their mind in the trainings of the small scope and the medium scope, they give rise, as it describes, to this precious jewel of mind, this precious attitude of bodhicitta. So those who have generated such an attitude worthy of reverence, I bow respectfully to those kinds of beings. And this type of being, a bodhisattva, even when someone causes them harm, even if someone acts as their enemy and inflicts harm upon them, they don't harm them in kind, but rather they have this sort of attitude, may I be able to benefit this being in the future? May I be able to bring them happiness? So even when someone is harmful toward them, a bodhisattva doesn't view them with the kind of attitude that would cause them harm, but rather, even when someone hurts them, all they want is to be able to, in the future, benefit them, not respond in kind.
뭐야? 그거 어쩌면 어야 다임 미쳤더네. 어느 가서 그래. 나 전주 선배랑 그 줄에 계속나. 아니 팬이 전부 열에서 팬이 리우드 담아도 내서 가가 팬이 시에도 와. 어디 시에는 그 내갑이 팬이다. 더두기 팬이시구라. 내갑이 팬이들 가로서나. 먼저 하다미 고반 토베트시구라. 내 손라 메키버시. 하다미 고반 토바테. 야, 라미 고반다 타르바 토바테. 내가 그 고바시라. 아니 더두기 고바데 탐제키메 고반 토바테 시구라. 어디 자주 셈라줄이 깨나. Drepung yorese. Chanju sem rangule ke sona, chanju sem gisen sona. Ene ngar sabe, nye sole kechi ki tikba tu pa, taadro yata. Rawatini tikba sartu mesabe. Pe yorese. Then Chanju Sembi Rangula Kenete Simsona, and then Lada Miller Kechi Kawa Sabatazo Kona Kondo Passion, Rawa, and then Sadu Sabatazoa, Chanju Sembi Simba Sozan Namia Miseba, Sangya Yeba to Tin Drebu, Namila Lonche Miseba Jurgese, or Tin do Chanju Sem Rangula Kena, Narsa Shabe, the Betozo Kotaxip Cherudrata, Sadu Mesobata, Narsabe, then Lada Milkechi Kyoto. Chanju Semgi Simnia Kone Kondo Pewala Sobe, Pay your race. Oh, yeah.
So, if you have been able to generate this attitude of bodhicitta, the mind of awakening, here Shantideva also discusses in the chapter on the benefits of this, the kind of temporary benefits we receive, as well as the long-term, the lasting benefits. So, in terms of a temporary benefit, by having bodhicitta, one brings about a birth in the higher realms as a human or a god, and liberation as well. This is a sort of temporary kind of need that is fulfilled by this attitude of bodhicitta. But the highest happiness of Buddhahood is also brought about through this kind of attitude. So even those negativities that we have accumulated in the past, generating bodhicitta has the ability to purify all kinds of negative actions, negative mind states that we have accumulated in the past. And so too, we cease to develop new negative actions. One, by generating bodhicitta, is able to purify those negativities previously accumulated, as well as prevent from generating them in the future. And it increases, it enhances all of our virtues. So we enjoy the fruits of our virtuous actions through higher rebirths as humans or gods, but it continues to develop and increase all the way until we reach that state of Buddhahood. So this is the kind of benefits that we accrue from generating this precious attitude of bodhicitta.
Oh, yeah. Thought about it. Oh, do Kasoda. When I did pay the tea and go to a castle. Gabu Chambe, Sanje Chum de, Sanje Chum de, Gabu Chambe of Sangachi Gua Kablia, and a symbol Ngarabashi. Gulu Shadra Sama says I could teach it. Never Chavina, Tipa Molam Tabni, Chama and Consulia. Kornga de Sambul Kevin at the Chisha. The nation has a Tamulushin Diba. Tamuchi Amachida, Daudu Shangati, Amati teacher, Sobuchabushan, Calaban. Shidochi do Nesanye, gave us a Urana, Delatraga Chimbatan, Tazukangatsu, sir. Netamu de Gulu Samasane. Malamtani, Maobana, Yatanda, Lugi Tragi. Konzu tsimbar sheba na shima bana chuyi tsimbar sheba shows malam kyane ne kornga de sambula gevrese kornga de sambu de ngema tinde le sane ne sanje ge malam kyane tambu cheso de kornga de sambula gevrese de lu chu yong kdwa o ti inde janju semte ra ngara zo chula ya nebardo tanda namsa janju semben zeba tamje Shimatunaya. Nebardo Sanjay Kovan Tobachagi some Kiwana Kiwa Cuti Kadena, Gona Sanjay Kovan Tobachigi some Tarangu Samutangua. Send the Chibu Samutana took Maras of the Tagira. Kiwa Yurumbu Kaze Gona Sanjay Kovan Tobachigi some Simja Tamjig to Tunge. Yankusa Dekunde Kibushin Jurachagi some. The Eche Tandana Kiwa Karesagina, Chuju Karesagina. Samatam de Sanjay Kobanto be Curcuriese, or the Tinde Samgurati, and the Tandangazua. Chunya dia. Tanda Chusanji Sumbecholia, Kibuchung, the Chimbecholia, Tebada Samba Combatione. The Tarchimbache, the Sanjay Kobanto be Curinjua Chagi, teacher Donet, and Bechunya, some Colos on the December shoes, or the.
So, for example, in terms of this precious attitude of bodhicitta, there was a story about the Buddha in a previous incarnation at the time of a different king being born and witnessing this mother tiger who was unable to feed her own cubs. And so, in order to be able to sustain her, he gave her his own blood, his own flesh and blood, and made this kind of prayer. May this being that I am now satisfying through my flesh and blood be born in the future in a situation in which I can satisfy them through the Dharma. And these are the kinds of prayers that led to the sort of entourage, those five beings that were the first of the Buddha's disciples to be born in such a situation. So we should recognize that even if right now we aren't able to engage in all of the activities of a bodhisattva, by trying to generate this attitude of bodhicitta, we should have this kind of long term thinking that even if I'm not able to practice all of the kinds of trainings right now, my ultimate goal is that whatever I am doing, however small this virtue may seem, may it go toward that final goal of attaining Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. May I myself become a being who is free of all faults and who has developed all good qualities, such that I am fully able to be of benefit to others. So, right now, we are studying the Dharma of the being of small scope and of medium scope and of great scope. And as much as we are able to, through our study, our reflection, our meditation, we should think, may this go toward the cause of my attaining Buddhahood to be able to benefit all sentient beings. So, please set such a motivation for listening to the teachings.
아주 그래서 달리안으로 사소하겠지. 다 등지 제바전에 아니 마주바 되셔서 걔네 등이 또한 지대도 나바든지 루뷰 매미시스. 남제 매반지 대니랜데 랑게 양라트는 도바인세. 다 등지 제바전에 신달 빼샤네. 신달데 랑게 양라를 다 등지 제바전에 라요 말스. 신달 랑원에 여나 다 등지 제바전에 디레스 신달 이바시. 니주여고 우리다 티지요 말스. 대신도 다 돼야 풍불이야더니 다 등지 제바전에 이거 말스. 랑원에 여나 다 등지 제바전에 니고 우리 티니가 말스. 이셔도 야.
So here, as for where we are in the text, we have been talking about, and this is on page 140 and 141 in the English, as Chandrakirti has said, the chariot is not established in the seven ways, either in reality or for the world. Yet, without analysis just for the world, it is imputed independence on its parts. So here, if there were something, some entity that existed from its own side, in its own right, then it would have to be findable through these seven ways. We would have to, through analysis, be able to point to and say, this is it. However, it is not findable in any of those seven ways, yet it's not non-existent, as it says, yet without analysis, just for the world, it is imputed independence on its parts. So we are talking about the way in which the self exists as a mere imputation upon its parts.
Oh yeah. Tena tada shingdala soba dine iba. Tena se tada shingdala soba chun dinam se rangshingi yu na se. Tit semli yabu shawura. Rangune yu na se rangshingi yu na se yora. Oh rangi ngoye yu na se rawadu yu na se yora. Tayi na dra shingdala kari ina chu kandri china. Yido wa yido me wa trada nyen kandri tuna. Rawa chikura. Zugusa yubarachi, nga de yin sayruchi kura, yugingwene, chi yube surichi nagdo gazo. Soso li chashade, soso ra, nga sidi, sokbo da, semda, sowa da, tezula tene pa ta shabachi yin samro chigmadwa. Soso mirawa, mi sonza mi sokbo la tenji ta kurwa, mi sokbo mena mirero chigmarwa. Mi lu ta, mi soro ta, mi samju ta, tezu kangala tejin drelni ene mi rete yormato. Nga se tezu paashane, nga se lingling rabchi chik rawa chi, tsuktu wara chik samlu chikugdwa. Namju lo lenje samlu nandwa gazo. Nga se du sokbu da teji drel ke kugmedwa, sem da teji ke drel kugmedwa. Kora rawa chi rangune nga ngarangi yu sere. Yingay sokpo resa nga rangi yose re samlo kogudwa. Tende nga chi yo ma re songi wada. Yene takpa sam resa. Rangu ne yo na. Kagi resa ta kiranti nga ling chi rangwa to chi yoba samte de kaba do se chegi wada. Chena ane sokpo na ne pumbu nga na ne raku resa yana. Yana pumbu nga le shenchi ne raku resa wada. Pumbu nga na ne yo na kadire ta sokpo dire wesa de. Sokpo ke rangi kanti ne chi ya samlo tangi wada. Ya samlo tangi ya la resa kokbe na ke nyingda loa chimba la soba chuma la so kanga samlo tangi ando. Chisu lebe patu che re samlo tangi mendo samgi wada. Kanti ne chisu ji patu luki chashe kanya yinba chi yo mara. Ta yinba chi yo mara. Yina tetan drel ne ta shaagura mato ta le sobo menge michi yungu mara. Mi yindu zang ko lu tan drel ne shaagura. Ta tena shi. Shibe na ne migi number shiba mara, nawe number shiba ne number shiba li ne tesu kanga riri ta mara. Ne kontro ta mara, ngaje ta mara. Soa ta mara, dushi ta mara, simchungu na ne simchungu kaze yu ne tesu riri ne ta mara. Tile shenpachi pumbu nga le shenpachi yo mara. Tile pumbu nga nalo le ta yinpachi mido aya, rangwa ta yinpachi yo na. Tile shentu ni yungu mara. Pumbu nga le pe tuen shentu yo na. Ane pumbu nga le mandriwa chi ta chi yo kora. Ti yo na. Ane luji chawa cheba ta semgi tsoa nyonga le soba tesu ta ke nyonga ta luji chawa kewa ta mikiwe le soba tsundru mara. Kope sokpo ta semdan drawa che yo mara. Tusu le shentu kora, rangwa shentu yo na. O ti indi ko. Ta di rangwa tsutu yo na se. Ane chene rangwa yo kore. Chene rangwa na che sati pumbu nga na che kore. Yana pumbu nga le los chi yo kore. Tabo kari tesu kala chene midu wasi kora. O ti che tu ane ta tungi. Ya te chi labda ta mandrasa.
Mhm. So here, whether we are talking about a self or a chariot, if it is something that exists inherently, autonomously from its own side, whatever sort of phenomena it is, again, whether it's a self, a chariot, something pleasant, something unpleasant, our friend, our enemy, it appears to us as though it had that kind of autonomous existence in and of itself, in its own right. It's not as though when we think I, we think of something that is just a mere designation. But when we actually begin to examine, we are a human, right? And that is something that is designated independence upon having a human form, having human consciousness and feelings and so forth. And so it appears to us as though there is something like solid and concrete, as though there were something autonomous that we could point to and say, yes, that is the I. Like, I'm here. I'm not a mere dependent designation. But when we search for, when we look within the aggregates, this self has to be existent somewhere either within the aggregates or other than, aside from the aggregates. But if we look at our form, say, all the way from the soles of our feet, all the way to the crown of our head, there's nothing that we can point to that is that self. All of the various, like our lungs and our liver and our kidneys and so forth, it seems as though there should be something we can point to and say, that is the I. But when we look within all of the various parts of the form, for example, there's not something that we can say is the self. But yet that self, that human being body or human being, is designated independence upon such a form. So when we look at then the consciousness, it isn't any of the consciousnesses that we can point to and say, oh, that is the self. From the mental consciousness to our visual consciousness, our auditory consciousness, and so forth, and looking through all of our mental factors, there's no mental factor that we can point to as being the I, as being the self. But yet, when we look inside of all of these various aggregates, it's only independence upon them that we can posit as self. It's not as though we can say that the self exists apart from, separate from the aggregates. Because if that were the case, then the movements of the body, the thoughts of the mind would not be of the self because they are totally disconnected, have an existence that is separate and apart from the the self. So if we had such an existence, an autonomous and independent sort of existence in and of our own right, then that self should be findable. But when we search within these 7 different ways, there's no way to find any such self. However, that means then that it is a mere dependent designation.
Oh yeah. 전에 가서는 뒤에 제바 쳐야 돼. 기타 가서라. 다 되면다. 자와시르 급수잖아. 탕아시기도. 자와시르 거서. 풍미 풍부 레슨미. 내가 풍미 들때면 대신시바 풍대면 대신시바 강시 있어. 산제리 자네. 산제이나 심제이나 가리나 전담바 두바치 버와. 사체디 전담바투 가서를 때 많이 게도 전담바마투 세트데 바라. 저 탐제 전담바마투 버와. 근데 산제 더부이나야고. 와 풍미세 산제에 거의 풍부도도 산제 말해서 그라. 풍부레셔메 풍부레던 셴베 네 산제에서 로서요 말해서 그라. 풍부레셔. 내가 풍미에서도 와 산제들의 풍부했던 셴베스기 파테네요 말해서 그라. 타바날 신도 샤바나 신가주 땡을 되게 바나시 대요 말해서 그라. 뭐 다대신에 직실 땡셔서 그라. 그 산제들 풍부를 주등신 수기 때문에 수기요 말해서 파등신 때문에 수기요 말해서 풍부도 산제니 세워라. 엔템바니 세워도 풍부레시면 떨라 풍부에 되면 풍부단 덴바 풍부라 던셔베 수기 덴베 술라요 말해서 그라. 덴베 수기요 덴바티야 말해서 풍부레시면 떨라 풍부에 되면 이시바 강시에서 어때 탕아 연구도 해. 풍부레시면 떨라 풍부에 되면 디셔 풍되면 탕아도 이거 안 들라 엄마 주베 가서 나와traba게 ni number ba ti ga yang ni sha yo ra shin da ra la le shen de me shen me ma ye ten den ya me shen ya la me ya la ta de me de ba sa me yi me sok ba de shin da ma re se yi de shin da ma re se ni ne ga do yin de pum bu da le cha de pum bu ga sok ba de da ma re se sok bu yi de da ma re cha ne ni ta de re ru yo ra ti chi la me.
So here, when it comes to the way of investigating this, now here in Chandrakirti's entry to the middle way, we have these 7 types of investigation. Here in the in Nagarjuna's fundamental verses on the middle way, we have 5 sort of modes of investigation. So he says that applying this then to the Tathagata, but it could be any being, any sort of self or object. The Tathagata is not the aggregates, but it is not other than the aggregates, nor is there a kind of relationship of support and supported. The aggregates don't possess the self, and the self does not possess the aggregates. So what could the Tathagata be other than that? So here, this goes through the points of not being something that isn't that the Tathagata is just the aggregates, nor is it something separate from the aggregates, nor is there a relationship of support in a way where each of those is sort of intrinsically established, nor is there a possession kind of relationship where one is possessing or endowed with the other. Now, when Chandrakirti engages in this kind of analysis and investigation, he adds 2 different types on that. In the case of the chariot, neither is it the mere collection of the parts, nor is it their shape. So too with ourself, we are not the mere collection of the aggregates, nor the sort of shape, the configuration of the aggregates.
Oh yeah. What I did kangali chajura. Dale charana shin dale charana shi che kangali chajura. Kangbata namduta motada kanga. Sobota rongoda lebada kangali chayra. Tai doing that tanga tindrisha sogbachina. Kora sogbati yala yungura. Chesha yungura. What is the nyamdo tash? Nata tatu in the chebachine. Kangajibare. The Tadi Yomaris to Sobotan Pumbu to the Yebes of the Chukodoya, the Yomar Chibara teacher, Ludile Taguara, lose, me lose the ya. Tatun Yala Goda Lagba Kangbala Soba Chasha Mambuyora. Tazula Tanga the Tatun Yugone Chebache Orba. Oh, Tishinde. Chidarchuji Tagan Dushini Sheba Tishin Kula Lu Charcha Sungudwa. Alia Tatun the Tanga la Soba Chebachene. Raone Maruba Te Shindo. Chet Samatam Chiba de Sungudwa. Oh, Tichi, oh, Timba, Tia Shaku Kashambura. Kashak Nambe Tayo Mara Sigurus, Shanda de Yebes of the Sorgadwa. Tayo Mara Sigurus, Shanda Yang Pumbu. I man and Sobo Yogumara, Long Chacha, Suda to Rexella Soba Yogumara, Ombu Yogumara, Tai Mana. Oh, Tea, the Derio Marto, so much about it, yeah, teach you.
Mhm. So this kind of analysis, either through the five pointed or seven pointed kind of investigation, should be applied to everything, not just the self or chariots, but really to anything like cars and planes and houses, our own body, our own head, our own brain, anything is subject to this kind of analysis. It is all the same. So there might be those that think that, well, the Buddha has asserted that there is no self, but the sort of the body and the mind exist, right? But we apply the same kind of logic and analysis to everything, to all objects equally the same. So in the same way that you have examined the body, or sorry, the self, one should apply that same kind of analysis to the body. Anything that is a collection that is composed of various parts is subject to such analysis. And so this is really important that we understand that the Buddha didn't just stop with saying there is no self, but likewise, the kind of things that are utilized by the self, the objects that we enjoy of our sense powers and so forth, are also existent in the same way. It's not that they're totally non-existent, but that even the sort of objects of our senses don't have that kind of existence which they seem to, they appear to have to us.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to my low in the cause of something.
No.
And that Tata Shingdala so be shit dinamse. Tata Shingdala so be as a chetamja yungudwa. Dinam Rangshinji Yena se. Rangshinji Yena, Rangi Moyo Yena, Rawado Yena se Chibara. Deku Rawa meba de Rawa Chani Yomarco. Shandala Tujan Jen and a Koran Mingji Pata and a tea by Chasha Urbato. Nga Rangi Yus Rawan to Yomarwa. Oh, Tinde, Rangshinki some, Rangi Moyo some, Roa. Oh, Tinde Yona Sugora, Rawado Yona. And then number chair the Sevanas, Tachebachura, Rangwin Yona, Kagres. Then I talk about some Basha by Netseke Yomarwa. Pumbunga Latene, Pa Mingji Tashana. They talk about some La Shower, Madoce and Yekwachi Yomarwa. Then I talk about some Yena. Tim Hazim Bijakura, Rangwina, Kokorangi Orta, Tozula Turjan Delco Marisana, and then Chen and Ye Yokura. Then the Shingdala Sobachun, then I'm Rangshinji Yona. Number chair the Sevan de Yeshi, Munzi Tumne, Yoko Janse. The Dar Mela set in the Tachani Omarwa. Then Mata Trakbe Yoba in Besse. And the country's yours and the Tayo Marvasa Yore. Pumbungabo Latene. And a pa, Jitang Tanyalia and Dimir, Trashy, Tundure, Sokwe Jack and Drut and the Trashy Drugdose, Trashy Kane Sheldon Kajashagatos, Ra, and a Trashy Nugget on the Trashy Nuggetos, Swat, Kibu Mendoza, Kibu Dosa, Kanga Shakudo, Condro said, Shasara, Soba Comgetos, Shitilet and Patakudo. That's some la Trashy Tundu Kansat that the Shaguramato. Then there was a year, but take some just simple shower. Then I talk about some silver. Ranjit Sama, Rala, Sama, so some just simple silver. The mirrors, the treasures, when a Ming Tange Tambutege, then they call Ming Chitara, Lash Show, and the Chudres Ming Tara. That's some you go simple shower. Rantit Sama Redora, Ming Tara, the Chuchiga Chuchi. Ming Medra Tauran, Zambulin Kangal, Ming Medra Svidua, Kotok Betas and Yabaditi Hakudoa, Jiming Jitasha of Kobdacha to Dalia. I tell the part, make it out some say. Mingita no teachures, or the mirror and the lagarita, the treasure sambete, samaridor, that's some you could treasure bahako shawra. Togbe ta some say, Ranzimbe sama rala sama so on some simba stire. De togbe pata and togba the samaroa, lo delicade. De lagan res pata so, lagan suji tonsona. De lagan res pa le tagwara, tit samare, lagan tore da. There's some December, lagan res touch tagan judin tanyeg. You see, sorry, or tilia lagan, then I talk about some to use. Togbe talk about some to use. Tanyegi wangi use. Tanyegi wangi shagba res. Tanyegi wangi shagba, Baimba Korang when I see you, and that's any kagres, segiora. Or tea deco, and they are barisora. That's a good trackway you by investing. Jidela could chick tras or a mingitade. Tambu mingita yomara, and it's lamni, Kadechi lamnichi hako is sogoto some mingta shara. Jigdena Karitrana, Pavana Pavekana Karitrana Tiri, Jagayani Jagakena, Arina Arikena Karitrana Tiri Bato. You Kurang Ngala Ming de Lagu says it's true to Yeke Yomara. You know, Kanga Ming Chiba Yigura. Ming Chiba Geta Mado Drabenda Mamutagua. Or did the Jidenji track way wanga Yobashaw. You might say it today. Jigdengi Tanya la Karchik to know what tea Yobatele Yobata Mavela Mavashaw Mado. Shageta Yomare. It turned down by you by early kissing mother. Jiden track way used to tell a Chebachi and say, Ayaka Yokomare. Kotahama Hone Talamaran Tambu Tasamaran said the Yora. That's a treasure cover, treasure daily secretaries, Gosa Sunata, Chege Omara. Don't buy you down, say Yokura. I'm going to the Yoko Johnson did it. Jiden track way you by him, and then you bet soon dingy. The number of Chevales. Third around when Yona, say any Ragurese. Yomarese, and a mares, Yorese. Then I talk about some Jigden track way wangi yores, Tanya wangi yores. Ranzimbe Samarala Sama Swansanje, Simbarese. Ranzit Samarala Sama Swansanje, Matsimbari Yomara, Taget Simbachere, Taget Zobashura, Sigora. Or in the shooting number two balese, or Dini Kone, Chen Yor, Tekonani, you think Boba. Lela voce ne te konani tombanya se de carre sigdo de lela voce ha ko to bude sigdo tena chu nam ge tongbe chu de rangwe ne tomba rang to tube tomba yebe chu de carre se tene ta fa sam jiden je trak be wang ge yoba tanye je wang ge yoba togbe wang ge yoba o tire te dar nge ba ke lang bara cha ko bara song de se o ban ju ba le se. Oh, Tibatu Chilona and the Lundi Chilona Digra, yeah.
So here then picking up in the text where we left off on page 141, consequently, if a phenomena such as a self, a chariot, and so on inherently existed, then when we search for it with analysis and we're able to identify it, saying this is it, it would necessarily exist, but phenomena do not exist in this way. So here, when it says if phenomena such as a self, a chariot, and so on inherently existent, this is where we say that something is autonomously existent in and of itself, in its own right. So here, we have this sense of like, well, I'm existent in my own right, existent from my side. I have this kind of inherent or autonomous sort of existence. But here, this is not something that can be searched for when you look with analysis. You're not able to find the thing under analysis and say, this is it. But that's not how phenomena exist. So instead, they exist by renown without any analysis. If we set aside then mere nominal existence, we would have to go beyond that. We would have to be able to find that thing. But if one is satisfied recognizing that things are merely nominally existent, we don't need to go beyond that. That satisfies, that is sufficient for existence. So when we look at the way in which there is no self, this is talking about there being no self that exists autonomously, independently, rather than the way that things do exist, which is by renown. And we can have valid cognitions with respect to that. We can say, oh, that's Tashi, that's Tundrup. And we have the ability to convey the meaning, have that understood. Like if we see the body of someone moving, we can say, oh, that's Tashi's going there. Oh, Tashi is thinking something because there are thoughts in that particular mind. Or we say, oh, Tashi is sick. And we can posit this all independence upon those conventional labels. This is coherent and actually allows for the functionality. We need to be satisfied by that level of existence by renown, by mere imputation. The moment that we go, and like, for example, we give various names to things. Like in Tibetan, we call it chu or water, this thing that is moist and so forth. The name that is given to that is water, or well, chu, but in English, water. And by giving names, we can have valid cognitions. We convey meaning with those terms that we apply to various phenomena. And so we can say, like, oh, this is a temple based upon seeing certain things. And that suffices for its existence. We can indicate to others that this is a temple. If it existed by way of its own inherent existence, this would not be feasible. We couldn't talk about things existing through renown. But here, if we recognize that it's just a name from the start, it's not as though this thing that is sort of moist and lubricating, we can just say, well, it is inherently existent as water or as chu or as whatever the name is that we give it, because it is a mere label. It's a name that is designated on the particular basis. And through that, we can then give meaning to others. We can have valid cognition with respect to these various objects. But if it were the case that phenomena existed in and of their own right, from their own side, then we wouldn't be giving those sorts of labels. Those labels would be inherently existent from that side. But when it comes to the way that things actually do exist, they exist by renown. They exist through our giving various conventions to them. And that is the extent of their existence. We can't talk about something beyond that, that's somehow inherently or truly existent, ultimately existent, but it is merely through their being only conventionally existent that we can have this kind of understanding. So they returning to the text, they exist by renown without any analysis. From examining in these two ways, not finding the imputed object under analysis and existing by convention without analysis, yogis quickly fathom the depths of reality. Thus, it is said that you must certainly assert in this way phenomenon's mode of emptiness, coming to understand that it is empty of any sort of ultimate true existence, inherent existence, and its mode of existence, how it exists as merely a mere conventional, is merely nominally existent.
Oh yeah, that Tama said Kungtang Yoda. Umajubales, Umajubales. Namdun Jimmy Kandi Chitabos. Number 20 Kone, Rawadu Tubayuna, Rawuna, number 20 Kone Sena, Ragor, Tiraya Meduas, and Yig Meduasera, Namdun Jimmy. Kandi Chitabur, Yeshi, Stindi, Rawadu Tubayu said, take Marisera. Yechi Nejupet, you menise, Rawadu Tubayuna, and then Nejupet Sene, Niku, the Tinia Meduas, Tindu, Rawuna Yomarisora, Yechi Nejupet, you menise, Janasora. Then the Nila, the La Jujuras, Tela Tenet, Tekonani said, the country, but the Telia. Lela Butone Jutu Gures or Juba Jugres or Dirte Trubanata, Merbes the Mer Marese. Truma to you may say, Judenji Tanya Jawangi Shakbase, or Judenji Tagbewangi Shakbase, Togbewangi Shakbase, Togbeta some said. Dirte Truba Tishin Dever Chase, Shedas, the Randeles, that the Umajuba Randegi Kuntangura, that the Chibba Maloshan. Never talk by nature pass, don't number two Madula, never talk just sing nature passura. Get the Shinda Shicha and over Rangshinji Truba Gashi ever tunas, Shinda Lichana, Shinda said, Rangshinji Truba Rangune, so Shinda Yens Truba Chiva Yenas ora, 대세 네 여바 주나네 태송 매바서 네 네바르도 소라 태송 매바르 나바 되래 가야롱아 시게 땅이 여바 네바른 좋아시나서 따째네 다 된게 거네 네바도 네바시고 그래서 거라 네바른 좋아시나 티라야 메도아소라 태송자 랑군에 매르서 네바야 마이노 대체라네 다 신다 셰차와네 나그 신다 매르베스나 신다 여마에 세데 가르스 그래서나 대체를 신다 셰차와네 마릭베 링도지 미냠버체바다 코네 딱바기 지된 시제네주 치마치심메셴게 지된게 지된 랑가와서게 당에 바다 샤바시오로 어디나시 때네 딱바삼 샤고레스고라 마리베 라브리지 미냠버체바다 코네 딱바인지세 랑신게 여반에 마이노 냠도 대다른 예바께 버주쇼다 지된게 당에 jo왕게 바딱 바삼 브레샤마도 유랑원에 대이 마이세지 두야미도 삼사 예신이 더구려 사고 더구려서 예바께 버는 주시 대코나니라야 내저베 tel라돈 죽바주서 대코나니 똥바니랴 진된 지된게 당에 바 유세데 대임바 랑원에 여나 여나 디레티나 제네니 라고르서 어디 야부자거나 내내저바게 티 가서 대코나니라 tel라돈 죽반 주에 주로서래 어디 봐도 지교나 야
Mhm. So here, then the source for what we have just been talking about above comes from Chandrakirti's Entering the Middle Way. So he states, what does not exist in the seven ways? How could it exist? Thinking this, yogis do not find the existence of the chariot and thereby easily enter into reality as well. Hence, you should assert the establishment of the chariot in that way. So here, it's not logical when we examine, it's not logical for this chariot or any other thing to exist from its own side, to have that kind of existence in and of itself, inherent existence. But by not finding that, by engaging in this kind of analysis and investigation, yogis then easily enter into an understanding of suchness, of the way in which reality is. As it says here, they thereby easily enter into reality as well. So hence, you should also assert the establishment of the chariot in that way. Although this chariot that is autonomous or inherently existent cannot be found, it exists as something that is merely a designation, merely labeled, merely designated by thought, and so forth. So here then, Chandrakirti's auto commentary explaining this passage says, for the yogi who is analyzing, if some inherently existent thing called chariot were to exist, then without a doubt, wouldn't he find the existence of an essence by any of those seven ways? So if it were the case that there were some kind of inherently existent, autonomously existent chariot or any other thing, then it should be findable. Through this kind of analysis, the yogi should be able to point to, oh, this is the chariot. But when investigating in those seven ways, no such thing is found. Therefore, thinking the so called chariot is only imputed by the impairment of ignorance's cataract, inherent establishment does not exist. The yogi generates certain knowledge and also easily enters into reality, has this understanding of suchness or the way that things are, based upon having investigated and analyzed, looking for such a thing, and coming to the conclusion that it doesn't exist in any of these seven ways, and therefore it is only existent due to being imputed by ignorance's cataract.
어야 안게 드레스도 유땅마데 오마주보 차와텔라 데데 니랑 데라 주주레스도 데데 니랑 세즈도 어데 앙세데 데데 니랑 데라 주주세 데 코나 니라야 데라돈 주반 주레라 네테네 딱바삼게 유츠테야 하코토브레세 탄다레세 안게 드네 군중 냐바 kunzu nyabaya minjirwa desu, kunzu bane mere beso, tanya to yobate nyamba mare, tanya to yore so ora. Jide tanya to yore, tanya to yobate nyamgi mare se atanda rese. Tende Nilang Talan Juju, Dirte Truba Tishin Dever Cha Sugudo Odea. Tichin Dine Matabar Trakbe Truba Dever Cha Ocean, Jigde Trakbe Wangi, Jigdengi Tanya Kartana, Mingi Tanya Kartana, Tichi so Tokbe Karisamna, Dinang Shishako Dese, Yema Teletago Desa, Jigdengi Tanya Nyamjuama, Matabar Trakbe Truba Dever Cha Ose. Kebatagi chondini kemeji penyudan cheba o nyamdu ane teme sawa kelang barchao se utan di cherum buchintozu di kechem busungu ora tanda di dawa tragba ki rangri ki lung trangi ora cheta kebatagi se chondini kemeji se tene tamba rangwa tu truba me ti yuna chene raku tanya je wangi ye tela chene raku mare se Jidengi Tanya de Kelang Kudese, Tamba Rawan to Truba Meba de Kelang Kudese, this song to us agora. Chon de Nick Gomez, Payudan Chebo, Tendre Yomare, Payudan Cheba, Tenet Tawa some Chachi Tamse Rumare, Tamba Truba Yomare, Tende Yomola Soba, Tanzilla Soba, Tezo Shindruera, Rawan to Truba Mena, Rawan to Truba Shimbe Wangi Yungu, don't check down the Soba. Oh, tene takba sam re se de, tene takba sam la chashi rongwa, jitengi tanya rongwa di che, ki manyamba se kele gu re sungora. Che ba o nyamdo teme sawa kelang bar cha o she song so, she song, atibo chi lan, ya.
So, continuing with Chandrakirti's quotation from his auto commentary, it says the phrase as well, which is from the above citation. So, he said that thinking this, having analyzed in those 7 ways, how could it exist? The yogis do not find the existence of the chariot and thereby easily enter into reality as well. And so, that as well means that conventionalities are not lost. So, you should assert this chariot as being established through renown without analysis. The learned think this position is flawless and beneficial and assert it without hesitation. So here, it is through this kind of investigation and analysis that yogis enter into an understanding of reality. And that understanding of reality or suchness doesn't degenerate. It doesn't cause the understanding of conventionalities to degrade because they understand that things exist in a way such that they are just merely dependently designated. We use whatever name it is to designate or whatever concept, whatever thought. But when we are thinking about those conventionalities, it's not as though you need to be able to search and find that thing. It is a mere designation. So they understand in this way that conventionalities are not lost. And so these, whatever phenomenon it is, whether it's a chariot or anything else, is established through renown without analysis. And so the learned, those who are really wise, understand this position to be flawless and beneficial and assert it without hesitation. They understand that through this kind of analysis that doesn't find anything ultimately existing, that doesn't undermine or negate the conventional existence of phenomena, but rather all actions and agents are logical within being merely dependently designated. They aren't undone or undermined by that, but rather it is through this that one understands reality, the deepest ultimate reality, as well as understanding conventional existence properly.
Oh, yeah. That did that, the Keshambure, Tanda Tamade, Kebatagi, Daughter Umajuba Randinal Desunda. Kebatagi Chon, the Nika Machine, they Konani Lachebe, Rawan to Tuba Mare, Serva. In a mare, Bessa Mare, Tanya Jiwangi, Jide Trabe, Shago, race, no etisura. They came about Kellen, who race, son to us, Kebatagi. Mataba Tuba, Dover Chavose. Kebatagi Chon, the Nika Machine, Penda Cheba, also Tipe, and they are arrested. They don't have a mesa, make Kelly Mason and it, Jidengi Tanya, Chachi Ron the Chateau or Marwa. A Thomas or Kelam Barchawa, she son to us. Delia Chetonga Bakarisunga Sena. Chetonga Uma Combarab Celesidoa. The Vena Ume come derese Tanda. Dawatabaki Uma Juba Randri comes to Sumba and the son to us. Cusente Vena Uma Be Uma Tanju come there. Shinda Drube, Sune Madaba Druba Tishu, 신다 요세 지단이 타냐도 요메세데 마다 마셔봐라 요바텔라 요바세원 지단 타냐 왕게 샤오데세 와 근데 정답만 매세데 랑원에 요나 땅도 째니 주요 랑원에 매바텔라 정답만 매세오데세 뒤께 매바 캐랑고 그래서도 근데 뭐까라 우마베 로라 케바타게 앙아르셰베 촌데네 꿰메신 배에다셰보 대연대요레 타녀게 남샤카가 샤투구레 dontampa matupate shathura niga tempa niga yabuja shathura dontampa tempa da kunzu tempa niga yabu shathu kunzu tempa shamatuna tanya namsha kanka jidura ane kage mesu sesha tene kyo meche peyodan cheba o nyamdu samde nibara kelang bar chao she song bes song duwa song juba randina o tende de lo kyo meba ralo la kelang bar chayese Uma tenjue lon de la meba tanda tamba nyegan joksude meba ane uma be lo la kelamba chawara mato uma tenjue lo la kele yo marese o tende se yo marese roa ka shecha ya de la lo yo ba maye no ran lo yo marese shengo mato ran lo yo mare kele yo marese tende se yo marese she nonko ar me chawa kende Kende oma tenjue lul pa, kende ya kurgi o ma rese, tangma de sebuche song towa sengora, o teachila vendesha, ya.
So here, as this quotation says, finding or actually not finding something like a chariot, but knowing how to assert things as existing conventionally, this is extremely important. So here, Je Lama Tsongkhapa in his elucidation or illumination of the intent states, therefore, and this is commenting again on the direct passages from Chandrakirti above, therefore, the way that the chariot is established in this Madhyamaka system is that you should assert accordingly establishment without analysis. So Chandrakirti says that in the Madhyamaka system, the learned think this position is flawless and beneficial and assert it without hesitation. And so hence this Prasangika Madhyamaka system is without fault, and you should make these assertions your own. So this kind of unique feature of the Prasangika Madhyamaka system is that although such phenomena as chariots and so forth are not findable, it doesn't undermine its existence conventionally. So there is a chariot when we don't investigate and analyze. This is something that is conventionally existent, and accept that that position is faultless, even though when one searches and investigates looking for the thing ultimately, it is not findable. This presentation allows for the proper positing of ultimate and conventional truth. In terms of the two truths, the Prasangika Madhyamakas alone are able to present those faultlessly. So do not ascribe fault to it by saying the Prasangika Madhyamaka system has no assertions. For again, although when searching with investigation and analysis, investigating the ultimate, one is unable to find a chariot, that doesn't undermine its existence completely, in that it is existent as a mere conventional designation. And within that, all actions are feasible, are tenable.
Oh yeah, tanga zo tenje de loga chaswa. Siba kole chunga sigwa. Siba sede ko kolo de koala sigwara. Siba kolo sede koa kordan de kolo nashin se chane de doari tutun de kogere che chaza. Siba kolo kogo che se shadwa. Rumuti che o ti chunga de shegwara. Siba kolo chunga luju de shegwara. Kande chungare, kande chungare, sti shegara. Tan dua long namjele, dua kapsung dua. Long namjele song batara se, dosa mena se, didar pagba, didar lagde se. Tan dua long le song bana se chana didare se. Ane shari buddha munge jipuni se dua. Shari buddha munge jipuni. Zutri jitobje nyewe jikdenda yidada. Tengzhu tozu ko tong de yora. O tozu kanga siga pebere sigora. Mungeji Puni, Nyewen Jigdenda, Ida da, Tundru da, Hada Min Jigdendam su Gyunesi, Pevnesi gora. Teta Dungewe, Su Ngusumdu Siksoose, Tesu Neta Dungewe Sute, Ngusumdu Sikbaresi gora. Tene Zambulen de Tsuru Chunshin, Tene Zambulen de Tsupene, Nene Chinese, Tsupene Shunesi gora. Rangi Chidar Sikbadar, Rangi Chidar Sikbadar, Chö Nyembe Kor Shibu Namla, Te Chö Nyenge Su Nam June Songju Nangiwara, Chö Nyenge Kor Shibu, Kor Shibu Sudu Kelon Pamani, Kenye Pamani She Yungwara. Ane Kor Shibu Namla, Simje Dewe, Simje Nyewe Jigden Liya, Tene Tunge Tsatran, 사회 냐와를 딘데도 trawe 냐와 딘데도 니고에 냐와 딘데도 냐고도세 셰기오라 내외 류뚜바다 제바소지 동해다세 제 뚜블라 소바네 카스테데 메 딘데오라 메 식발라 소바텐데 이다 남라야 제바다 콤바소지 사회 메베세 제간도 마라테 딘데세 동해 냐기오라 돈도 남제 찍라 찍 사와라 소바 동해 Chad Chung to the Sagra. Hanamji, Chipoe Kaji, Tungeda, Han de Bell Hatozulia, Namji, Tungesio Amarte, Shigalamuteliata, Shito Yabahakone, and the metal with Tamata to the Ningbachane, Loga Shasha Yusara, and the Tessa to the Tibarishka, and the Maoba Kawaki in a dear Haku Yora to Etela. The net to Shanda to was given a person there in Gura. Lai Tsumbo Pe Loga Shash de Tunge Shukchabu Yogore. Namju Tsawasio Marwa Pe Kipda Shusoda Kausoda, and the medical Shinsha Chibuchi Tegura, Pusum Nelu Lonjo Kanga Pusum Sawasoda. And Chila Chi Hanamji Chipu Kapji Tungeda, Shigalamutela Tetu Kanga, Medrash and the Lashada Medrash Tekudune. 마음바 계세대 하고 동해 숙천부 요거라. 아니 라니 라네 무슨도 동화시대. 라니 라네 개솔라 소바텐데 동화다 하고 요래. 하도 저게. 급순보이네 시도 하다 녜마카네 요다 다다 가데. 마음바나 가바께 요베테 하고 요서라. 어찌다. 아니 미남 시갈라 못텔티 계세대 하고 요서라. 아니 미남 비 론주 소와다. Minamla Tunga Karus, Saya Toya Koya, that she madinity, and that you de Yora, Lonju Sogora, Lu Soya to that she wrote, Lu Soya to the Lonju Goram, till a loud shake Omara. That's all. And then Minam Lonju Soloata, Chalbada, a Tashinja, Timarava, Tichi Togo, Satimarati, Yavati, Landra, Tambo Maraba Tunga Rata. Nyasache metube tonga ya dejden beba shawe tonga se ma bunyota yora ngara za hakodera ane chakba soge tonga jebese e konzo chö shenge nyenge to tende chö so bese ka jebe ke kan shi ngodo o tende so de ne chö nyenge kan sa to ngema ko shida chö le tona menge to e tona chö ru chinje ko Tende Chenyanga Mambuchare. Tunga Chebe Ka Chebe Kanshi Mondo Sambar Chuba, Kevo Kanshira, Mikashi. Mondo Sambar Chuba, Tarba Toviata, Kevachima Lamikoba Toviata, Sanjakoma Toviata Zulko, Tonage Yomar, Samba Chuba Langomba Megawateda, Samba Chuba Langomba Kashi, Ever Jurose. Otiba to Chislam.
So here then we are switching to a little bit of a different topic. In the English, we are going to go back to page 91 to talk about the origins of the wheel of life. So there's this drawing of the kind of situation of samsara as the wheel of life. And this is getting into the source of that and what that means. So the Buddha taught in the exegesis of the discipline that his disciples Shariputra and Malgadyayana both traveled throughout the world of the hell beings, hungry ghosts, animals, gods, and humans, and directly saw their suffering. So through a kind of miraculous emanation, Shariputra and Malgadyayana visited all of these various realms and had a direct experience of the sufferings of those realms. So after they returned to this world of Jambudvipa, they described what they had seen to the four types of listeners. This is what we normally refer to as like the fourfold Sangha of monks, nuns, laymen, and laywomen. And so, based upon what they had seen, they were able to describe the kind of sufferings that these various beings undergo, like the sufferings of the hell beings experiencing extreme hot and cold, the pain of having their bodies chopped, cut, and so forth. As well, having gone to the realm of the hungry ghosts, they witnessed the suffering of their hunger and thirst and so on, not being able to get food and all of the kind of sufferings that they undergo, as well as that of animals, the animals suffering of eating one another and being used by humans and so forth. The suffering of gods, the gods suffering at their time of death and transition, and their suffering knowing that they will fall to the miserable realms. So here we think about gods, they don't usually experience a great deal of suffering, but when they are approaching death, the very beautiful flower garland that they had begins to fade, to wither, and they know of their impending death. They're kind of shunned by others, and they are awaiting this terrible fate, knowing that they are likely to fall into the lower realms. So most of their life has been spent sort of attached to, craving for the kind of subtle pleasure that they endure. They have all of these excellent things, these excellent possessions and food and so forth. But at the end of their life, they have to give up all of that, and most of them are going to fall into the lower realms. And then there is the suffering of humans. The humans' sufferings of searching for resources, having attachment, and so forth. Now, we as humans largely know the suffering of being a human, but having to sustain ourselves, having to provide for ourselves, having to have attachment for various things. We get various things, and then we are worried about losing them, about them degenerating. Once we get things, that doesn't mean that the worry and the suffering is over. So here, this then it continues by saying the people with whom they spoke had previously spurned virtuous deeds and came to appreciate them and have faith in them. Shariputra and Malgadyayana, by giving the kind of overview of their experience, were able to make those who didn't previously pay attention have some kind of faith in the Dharma, really get them to understand about karma and so forth.
Oh yeah. Tata Shariputra Mungeke Punyake Chetambana, the net Chetnage Namjuda Medrape Mabu Dubati, Kolea Commissionera, Chetnababu Shindu Mabu, and Dudese, Shariputra Mungeke Punyi, Joe Mambu Yonso Koala Chetambar Kurtose, and then Mambule Namjuchu Shesa the Medra, Joe Mambule Chetan get Kurese, Atiba de Chilana, Ochushenko.
So, whenever both Shariputra and Malgadyayana gave teachings in this way, a multitude of listeners gathered. And so, more than normal people would come to listen to the teachings that were given by Shariputra and Malgadyayana. This was something that was quite inspiring to people, and more than would normally listen came to these teachings.
Oh, yeah. That's a Shariputra Mungeke Punyala Chenyaba, or Chenyage Mabuchuan, Mabu Duber Gurala, Trenes, the Nikaja Sanjachum de Delet in the Shuira, Tumbes, and Tumbe, Gunkawala Sumbase. Oh, you do Tamjedo, Kelon Shariputra Mungeke Punyata, Chutambabu, Minjun. Oh, Tati Shariputra Kunina Shchuta get over Shungo Marese. A Kuni Shavanashi, the share the Kagatsu teacher, Romu teacher, and the test on the Abudes Sondua. Chutambabu Minjunwe. Kinduji, Tamja the Shariputra Munge put up with Chutamba Minjunwe. Kinduji Sula Kange Kogando, and draw ring Piri Changese, Kendiki Zula Kangi Kondalia, Droa Nyawa Yeda Tundro Me La, Chewa Tinde Droa Ringa, Ramutu Tree, and it Koa Koya Kuka Tinde Yala Chungi to Tinde Chit, Korang Shevanashi, Jina Yabode, Zula Kangi Kondalpa, Tramse, Tinde Chene Abode Soda. Munge Japuni Mabu Mejoe, Kendiki Zula Kangi Koganto, Droa Ringa Pirisha. Droa ringas tu nyawa yeda tundru me lasya na ngarawa. Ene ladele niche ladan lama yinse niche na droa ritu rendora. Droa ritu sede ringa sede. Ladele niche na ene ritu rendora. Ladan lama yinse chikse na droa ringa rendora. Ringa se pirishengi se. Ringa pe. Pe se rimuti ni sungora pirishengi. Koya kolo changaba titi se. Kolo na shiche changabasde nyawa yeda tundru min droa ringa kaga se ane ti thalia tende yala chunyi konde kwa kuchu tu yora ne ka sura changaba tide ese zula kando kimda da tramse kimba na mitso da tramse chiribe tramse che ka konge tu tramse Lagwa Namlas, Yonge Samalia, Sibakolo, Sunday Tende Yala Chuni, the Sibakolo the Tea, Drawing, Nico, Koya Kolo de Tome Marwani, Palatende Yala Chuni Tiora, or Tezu a dance order. Sunday Tende Yala Chuni, Yakone Kor and Jubada, Koa Candice Kurger and drawing a la Candice Kigi order. The Mabas and the Candice Mabas order and Donna Candice Dobas order. Tezukanga Hakuya Sisungura. Telen Dogbe Sunam Tinshi, Econes Tembashi, Cudele Kunju Tembasha, Drebudele Tunga Tembasha, Don do the Cudelia Lamdesha, Drebudelango Densha, Tezu Hakuya, Tembashi de Hakuya, or Tezuko de Yabushi, the Sisungura. Kone Judo Jutsu, Kwan Jubetsu, Tunga Temba, the Kunjuni, Yikone Kwan Jubetsu, Godenda Lamdeni, Kone Kwan Dogbetsu. Oti Chishitune be kelon keba shi kindunam ye kor song so zula kan le ta kunye ge sharipoda moge pusong bana shinchecha doa ringa to kaga ti ane ti tadelia yala chunyi kone kwa kodan kolo tunge temba da kunju tembe kone kwa kodan lam komba le tenen dawdan tezo hakwe tezo sheba jangen ge kelon tinde kwe Chilolia can do Sola can jagay also conjole. Kelon cabbage, sheba capture so or tipo de Chilona. Hamagos Medoa.
So, many people became followers of both Shariputra and Malgadyayana, who gave them teachings, and a great number of those who listened to Shariputra and Malgadyayana's teachings discussed them, and word reached the Buddha, who said the following to Ananda. So, he gave this kind of advice, saying, such Dharma teachers as the monks Shariputra and Malgadyayana will not exist in all times and in all places. Therefore, in the entryway to the Sangha's temples, my followers must draw a 5-sectioned wheel of life with symbolic representations of the 5 types of beings. So here, this is where the Buddha advised that such a wheel of life should be drawn at the entrance to temples to sort of summarize the meaning of this within a drawing, a representation. So at the door of the temple, there should be a kind of drawing of either the 5 or the 6 realms of existence, the types of beings, and on the outside of that, the 12 links of dependent origination that describe the sort of causal process by which one takes rebirth as one of those 5 or 6 types of beings. So when we talk about 5 types of beings, we have hell beings, hungry ghosts, animals, humans, and gods. And if we make that into 6, we divide the gods into demigods and gods. And so in this sort of 5-sectioned center that is surrounded again by the 12 links of dependent origination that give the kind of process by which one cycles in samsara, as well as an understanding of what it is to get out of that cycle. So here it says, Then the Sangha must appoint a learned monk who is able to precisely teach the householders and Brahmins, so Brahmins being those that have some kind of knowledge of religion, probably Hinduism, who come to the temple the symbolic meaning of the wheel of life, the entry to and reversal of cyclic existence in terms of the Four Noble Truths, the way beings enter cyclic existence by means of the 12 factors of dependent arising, and the way to reverse that. So here it is through this drawing that one is able to describe the kinds of process of dependent origination, the sort of forward order whereby through the origins of suffering, one it affects the cause of, or sorry, the effect of the truth of suffering, and how it is that through the truth of the path, one is able to reverse that and attain a true cessation. So here it is by this drawing, this representational drawing made at the a door of a temple, that one can understand the kind of process of cyclic existence through the Four Noble Truths.
Oh yeah. Oh, di ka so da. Di nyawa yi da tanru da tsu she de de. Chui to sa ha kong ge chi na ko tsu she na. Ani chi ko da kyu ka ri ba ko do da kyu ka ba ya bo ha ko yo da. Ai na ten sa ko chu she de ya. 당부 다 nyawa ki ge yi da tanru da tong ge yo de ke wa shi sa su ne de ke yo se na. Ka she ka bu chi yo ma ra. De thoma ko mi chu 당부 nyenge. Chöge netura yagora auza ha koko bata tuzu mashene yagayinjirwa. Te sanchire shira sheju yomare. Sigdo ati tembarisra. Ina tangbudaga kutunge shiji sheshide te semba mejiba sugusam. Ane ko tenyi menge chaya nyaga yora. Ina ya ko chitan shendaga sheyate kunjoge kira kalmachi na chira kunjo ge tile tangire se wara kewa tuja te te nyawle ke chu idal ke tubu yongre se ti she yo mara nga che ti so ge le sange ne ti cheba bo te yo mara ta se kunjo de shenda cheba bo chi ge samlo ta ne ka she nyawa ke ida ke mile ke tando ke konzo koya kare to tile te ko sam ende songe na be khele ge yo mara ju de cheba bo se ra Kina jide cheba bodo ko chawa yongere chi yingo jira. Kina kanga chikba kora rawa chaza yona, tangbu ne te sogo marwa. Kanga yagbu shichi so shen tagra. Mi sude mi kondu me sage, samba ngemba menge chi so shen yagara. Ki kanga ko soya chi yuji mara. Ki yona te tinde sora. Chisa nangbe te ke lengi yo mara. Shenda chigo sosu dewa tunge kyangyagi rawa chasan cheche ko soyachi yo mara sigwara. Ine tundu tunge tuzu nga zungu sum tongdarwa chigla chig sawa tuzu tingsa mabu tongya dowa te. Chigla chig sana ko saya chigdowa. Mi jigdele drabu dowa chig chig tango sudu sagi yo mara bado se tup che de kar mi tongdra chidra segdowa. Merjo kyabni segdo, merda tangni segdo kar. Toshi tenge doa kanzo mi jidale yora. Keshenge doa pe keshe se yora. Uka se yora. Ndameda doa teko. Mugi shinge saudo doa kala sange me kyani shinge mabu doa. Tone shinge mabu doa. Sako nyawa yida tundruda chandrawa den jigde miyule yosora. Chandrawa doa kanzo damu doa. Chazan di kar soda. Chi sangma te shenda cheba bu yo mara ta ase. Soswe maung ba ta, dewa da tunge te soswe lakwa yo re se. Gyudin di re se soswe nga samsa ki. Ine nga ye samsa shensha ki. Tele tene tele kyon chenge tele kondro ki. Chi chadang ge wange le mege wa sa. Ine nyawa yeda tandul ki. Chadang wange soswe chakbe wange o nga tele kyen yawu medu. Yabu yongudu samde rangla shenjaya gwangi leke wa saasuna, ene lada mili ke te kik reese. Soso lakba yo reese. Yina te yo reese shek yo ra. Yo ra, ngune ra yo ra, kezi shek yo ma ra. Tunduli ke ya ten duwa ka zite. Chikla chik saya tungu sum toya duwa. Mesa Taya do Kangadoa, or Ti in Dukan Soda. Di Soso Lagbalio, Shanda Chebaboyo Maresam. Di Maoba Yoma, the Soso Jusa Masala Ralegi Samna. And the Soso take the matter, Soso Lega the Chigra. Not to send the la Juden, Soso Yagakar, Tugakara Hakodoa, or teach an Kanga Yongure. Kumakui Kazi Shana Zongal Drude, Miss and Zongal Drude, some Shea Kochigmadua. And the Miss and Zongal Chunga Yora, the main Jigdala Yora. Zala Chugura, Timlet Segura, Kepa, Timje Soto, Batangade, the Washing in the Tatangade Yora. In that they call Judy Sosama Sanity Rogo Medua. You have to shake Tish and shake Medua, or Tisos in the Machan and Rogo Yomarisa Soso Rawadua. So what is some lococho Guyora? The day Yora is in the Tilla Droma today. Shadachi Baboji, Wamisataya Yomaratase. Sendela Soso Chachu, the Yongamasabe Lake Digoge, the Druyor Dasana. And the Tilla Droma didn't let me go the Paka. Yo the Trumani Yago Tachura, Soso Lagua Yuvanashira. It's all the Keshu Kuyora, or Tichilamnea.
So here, when it says that this is described to those who are, like, say, entering a temple, the way beings enter cyclic existence by means of the 12 factors of dependent arising, and the way to reverse that. This is something that is usually explained to those who have some kind of understanding already. There are some who, upon hearing the teachings, like if they're taught, oh, there's this hell realm and you can suffer from hot and cold, and the realm of hungry ghosts, and you're dying of hunger and thirst and so forth, they really don't like that. They don't like to hear about these various realms and the kinds of sufferings that one can experience, because they sort of get depressed by that or get scared by that. Now, so this is something that is maybe better to teach after someone has a little bit of understanding, not right off the bat. But here, it's not as though that it is teaching here that if you say don't listen properly to what some sort of higher power, some kind of creator says, then the god or that creator is going to put you in a hell realm or is going to give you something good. But rather, it's not as though there is some kind of creator with all of this power. Rather, it's up to you. If it were the case that there were some kind of creator who were in the nature of love, for example, why then would they have created beings who, for example, can get angry and can do these sorts of harmful things to one another? So we need to recognize that we have the freedom in terms of our own happiness and suffering. It's in our own hands in terms of the kinds of causes that we are creating. It's not as though we are being told about these realms to be scared that some kind of creator is going to send us there, but rather we are being told about the various types of sufferings of those realms. Excuse me, in order to avoid creating the causes to be born there. So we can see as humans, like, for example, the suffering of animals is something that is directly apparent to us. We can see how they eat each other, how they prey on one another, the kind of fear that they experience. But as humans, we don't necessarily eat each other straight up, but we do worse things to one another. And we can see that sort of parts of these various realms exist within the human realm. For example, there are beings that die of being, chopped apart. There are beings that die of hunger and cold. There are beings that die of famine, of thirst, and so forth. So it's not as though there is some creator, someone who is doing this to those beings, but rather these are the results of the actions that beings have created in the past. So your suffering and your happiness is in your own hands. It is due to this thought of, like, I, grasping at an I, that kind of self-cherishing attitude, and then the kind of attachment and hostility that arise from us that cause us to engage in various actions. And due to those actions that we have created, then you experience the ripening results of those. So here, it's not as though this is being said to just scare people. This isn't a lie. We can see, for example, in the animal realm, what animals do to one another. And it's not as though this is done through the control of someone else, but what we experience, for better or for worse, comes from the actions that we create. Like, for example, we could say, oh, well, if you steal something, you're then put in jail, like as if someone is giving that punishment out to you. Well, you wouldn't be put in jail if you hadn't done that thing to begin with. So it is due to our own actions. It's not like there's some creator punishing above. And it's not as though this is being taught to others to just have some kind of fear, but rather, if we don't want to be born in such a situation, if we don't want to experience those kinds of results, we then need to take care that we don't accumulate the kind of causes that lead to such a rebirth. And understanding the process by which that happens helps one to end those kinds of negative actions.
Oh yeah. Oh, the Induka soda. Oh, the Chambutoaka soda. I do Geshe do the co. To make a tundala shaggy mara, somebody kibu young tundala shaggy. Ina, you didn't disana Mahobana Tindre to me, your decision shoulder. Mr. Dinala, so the young Mazanek, said Dirala to me to come at the younger that shadow. The Hakona Yawa, Cudition and the younger tasam. Drebu to metal and jigni to the trend, then it to the Kana Yawa. I Jimejico, Yada Tundre to me, and a quick kibu younger man. Ram Mahobana Tindre and Tin, Mashane did Rocco. Miki was to the Pana de Yora. Oh, Kira, Miki was to the Pancurita, Shala Sawa. Yawa Tom and Sasha and Miki or Mabu or Songazu Madira Ase. Simje Sule Sawache de Madira Ase. Said Dele Simje Sule Sawachi Yo Marta. Penta to the Penta or the Penta Matuna. Never get you a Marisha. Lunga Yesum Yukon Shala Sawa de Pa. And a Shala Chiniji Pemba Tuna. Which I never do. Never to wish any matter what you know. Oh, kill a sambo, killing a lion, Judy Carresana, make you a chew. Shall I say, make you a chew the son? Killing a but a mobile to me, Grace. Oh, Tindozo, give a chew the shangy salt of soba. Shall I sew up on a shall pember to the chini pember to na? And it's a man had a millet, Jenny. You are some to Grace. Titondaliane, Miguel Chutepa, Lima Yeso go the Kiwachute, in Dogsho Kiwachute, Yabutu Gures, Titrum the Digua. Kawatoma Mevana Sashabe, Shala Sawacheba and Kiwache. And it said Delea, Shala Sawacheba, Unatil and Kiwache. I change it to Giesam, Tiabude Medusam, Mahobana to Ganchi Shasam. It's said Delia, Chini Pemba Trusam. So cheba pante so chopse. Machimba leba pante shala shangi rala mawambe nor chiga cup kubache. Kimasam. Ragi shala nor the shall panto to the panto kisam. Lohim sarara, jitang sulu the timber chance of Captain Denetire. When a mission daria, Sazan Yanganyam do Sane. In the Shanico Lohim Sigra. O tin dogjo kewachu yora. O the troop. Make a shell saw lunga so make a shoot the pana. I give us my abu would send it to a resident never to get a shake than in China. Oh, teacher, Tatunda. I ran to shake the caressana. Yes, all my gives a Kawachima Abu to Dalia. Your Toma Mevana Sasha. Make a letter to la Shakwache. My devil is some Mamusa or some. Don't shout at the. Titondal Chase, Kawakari Trukina, the Batus of Bandibur, some jealous Sawache, but Tamja Shavi, some Sendela Chigmesa, Maubana, Tinde Messiva, Charochi, some Susu Samlutara, O Tindeche, Marshabala, Josem Yashamache, Sendela Tipana, and the Kawashima Lada Meliki, la Tachere. Ranges only Mekia the Tachesara. It should tambu in case should the tea in some good. Najute Tonaka Sigmara, De Laborashida, Tunjusha, and Shandashi, and I'm such a dry Yabesodashira. The Yomara. O teacher Labna.
So, here it is important that we really understand we're not explaining the Dharma in order to bring about suffering, right? We explain the Dharma in
네네네.
order for us to have happiness. This is the means by which we have happiness. So, here it is important, however, for us to have a kind of understanding. The reason that, for example, the sufferings of the hell realms and hungry ghosts and animals were explained is to let us know that if you engage in certain actions, you are going to suffer like that in the future. But it's not as though it's necessary to go into all of the details of those sufferings. The main important thing is to really understand that abandoning the 10 non virtues is really a foundational kind of a practice that we need to respect, and engaging as much as we are able to in beneficial activities for others. So, really, this foundation of not harming others, not engaging in any sort of violence or harm toward others, and trying to help them as much as you can, that is sufficient. We don't need to go beyond that into like really the details of whatever the sufferings of the hell realms are and so forth. But as long as we have this understanding that doing such negative actions is going to have consequences, and the opposite, if we're able to benefit others as much as we can, then this is really what is going to bring about good results. And so, too, we have, even if not in this life, in many previous lives, accumulated all kinds of negative actions. And so, it's important to feel a sense of regret, of feel a sense of remorse at those actions that we have done in the past, and in turn, make a kind of resolve, give rise to a mind of restraint, saying, I'm not going to engage in such harmful actions again in the future, but try to benefit others as much as I can. So, whether it is our recognizing I'm not going to take life or I'm not going to steal, instead, I'm going to try to be as generous and helpful to others with my possessions and my mind and so forth. I'm not going to engage in sexual misconduct, like go around with others, husband and wives, and create conflict and so forth. When we have that kind of understanding that we don't need to explain every single potential suffering and really detail all of the kind of details of a hell realm, but if we have this sense that of the importance of this practice, that we engage in confession, purifying those negativities that we have accumulated in the past, and do whatever virtue we are able to do. This is really so important. We shouldn't look at this as being like, oh, well, that's just a small kind of practice. That's something insignificant. I don't need to do this. But rather, if we have that as a foundation, if we really make our most basic practice abandoning the 10 non virtues and engaging in positive virtuous actions, then we are guaranteed a good life in the future, whether we are looking at the kind of specific sufferings of the lower realms or not. Having that as a basis or as a foundation is so important. We shouldn't look at that and be like, oh, well, that's just small, that's insignificant, I'm going to get to the higher kind of things. But rather, if we have this as a foundation, then it is guaranteed that we will have a good rebirth in the future.
오야. 다 지당 거디 네 신고도 저 최세대 가리보다 하고 거도. 최세대로. 다 지당 도시에베네. 최대 천델이야 거 디지던다로. 천델에 때와. 네 니송고도 상제. 시가서네. 겨우만보라 펜바다 겨우만보라 대회실수도. 겨우만보라 펜바스는 마음바네 펜야던다래. 대회실수도 천델에 대회던다로. 아주 샹라 차와파 미겨 주도 빠데 페나 저 참아체 밀레 참아체다 직주부셔야다 와 nenapsim nesim 셰야다 네 소저 마지막으로 로임 셰야다 미겨 주도 빠 개와 주도 주다 소소 기바요라 밀레 페 소소 메가 신게 뇨르도라 네 콘도 충충체 내가 저 짐바 수팀 서바세 퍼신 냠레셰 언디사 짐바세도자 짐반남시체라 개와 추도지 수팀 이제 좀 배르다르다 펜바쳐야 돼 샹라 짐바 동안라 서베코네 샹라 펜바쳐야 돼 짐바도 담보러와 짐바 담보래 니바들이야 수팀 데려와 샹라 서와 담보더라 띵이 용알라 서버 검색도 띵이 야고치 용고 요나 서버 검고로 마도 서버 마고네 띵이 용야 요 말에서 남주고 말에서도 파 미게와 주의권에 처음 마셔 진이 뱀바시나 고추야 소선 대바다 매드바다 감 매드바다 소선 대바다 개와시바다 된데 용구라 맨데체다 대바에 계획세발에서도 랄 대바 맹게 미시바다 소선 대바라 계획세발서 용구라 이데네 예메대아세 콘도 용구라 이제 콘도 용나 아니티 서바 마곰나 근데 신바다 샬라 패톡 베시도 신바다야라 소바다 ane karsoda ba chudim chawa panya de yong ma de so gara ni lam de long a chi ku gi na se ba ko mo de so ra ta ko ton da ko do chung chung che nga je chung chung che me le tong chung ma che ra dong ye da de na sam ya wu chi chang ma chi ya wu chi chung na sam jin ni ji pan ba do jin ni ji dong ye pa che na so so chen de le ki ba ra rāngā kīpara nāngmīya kīpara sāpa kōm tīndrā chāna tōngchū mācā shāna chādō mācā na sōsōya kīpara mē kīpara tsendela tewe chetu sūngi wara kōntō ngā jē chādō ndrā simla sōpa kāyā chūnchū che shāna tsawā pā shāna chīni pāmba chūna sōsōya kīpara sōsō nāngmīya kīpara yungurā sāpa kōmgi kōmgi chāna mēsī tē tendrā lū rwa tendrā lū tēn sōsōya kī chetu nghe xong đã mình ra trên cái mà rồi, số số mấy次的药物些搞不透那个，搞不出都是想来吃完嘛，就今天判不出，看着嘛就俺就超到人生的什么穷的钱呢，现在的第一了，俺就没什么通过的，当人生些俺就些超到些这个就些，都觉得他牛的怎么里可能看得出来的，牛把那些知道，要靠地看手的。 现在来대회 시도 쳐라. 이제는 남미 대회를 지소 대회를 롱벌 뛰기 요구하라. 현대 맞추나 이 총을 남장장 겁나야. 나가라 개체부이 이내 시행을 서와 지금 했으나 저기도 저는 개체셔를 결혼된다 가르치는 지인데 이 시행이야 결혼된다 주를 시행을 내가 마셔서는 저기도 요저 가게 되네 다 쳐줘도 어디인데 가르쳐라. 세대티지 요한테 달려와. 상계남의 중화 대에서 대회시도 배우래. 지된 대회시도. 최대 방향 대화 예에서 최대한 된 지된 대회시도래. 세대를 티지세 잠바다 세외권에 내봐이나. 저 치마 능에서 맞아 하다 미고 봐. 푸스 펜바. 최도 대화 푸스 펜바서라. 펜바다 대화서 펜디 말로 버서다. 최세대 펜디에서 펜바서대 마음바 유rin 붙게 시오라. 아니 겨와상 불린 그래 야가 용그래. 진제부터 때네. 근데 sendelea cheche tinglamda chik karsore shidi yongayada tendeche samlutan to so tunghe chungwa yinaya tiye samlutan dan labgidowa to tunghe chungwa yinaya susen sheya shunju to sima dhutaga namsam meka ma che sim kya che sen sukpa chawo se te yongore koare tos yongore kayo mara sam nangme tanga yine kayo mara chundura 강에 춘중대질 쇠바잖아. 아니 버루질 강에 가르쳐나 메쇠바 차기어라. 쇠tum게 차기어라. 가리나 쇠투가 차. 버루질 쇠탐제 대화를 했던 게 있어도. 가르쳐내 지기래. 그 줄로내 야가 준다 도와 준다. 그 쇠바금 이런게 쇠바금 야고 준 삼나. 소소 되게 교련 두려라. 쇠탐제 대화를 했던 게 있어요. 검세 든데 셔놓고 가르쳐나 그 대화 마도 저기 이게 라는 메뉴가 차야요라. 어디 인데 그 소소 냠냠을 사는 그 첸델이야. 가서래 가요요 제제. 샬라 저와 봐야 템버트에 니링 메시나 삼르다. 내 소소다 나미다 가리네 템부체야. 지소 템부체 소소 레가체 강가 로사도 템부체잖아. 정말 대화로 기회라. 텔레테네 텐 드레부텔레 마오바나야 아니. 다다 미고와 토야도 부수소 용그레스 디시에기도 와. 되지 람나 힘들어.
So, here, just returning to the idea of Dharma, and what is the Dharma about? We hear the Dharma as being described as sort of the cause of benefit, and benefit referring to more long term, and happiness. I mean, the Dharma creates benefit in many future lives, as well as happiness in this life. So here, if we think about this, we can really understand from our own experience. If we speak divisively, if we speak harshly to others, if we lie and so forth, we are more miserable. When we abandon those kinds of actions, those sorts of negative activities of our body, speech, and mind, there are fewer that dislike us. There are more harmony between the people that we are around. There is more help and sort of mutual assistance and so forth. And so here we need to understand the way in which practicing Dharma is really founded on this basic idea. If we want to create the causes for our own happiness in this life and benefit in future lives, we need to be generous in the sense of being able to give to others, benefit others. And that in turn is based upon having a kind of ethical conduct, having the ethics of refraining from harming others, the ethics of benefiting others, and the ethics of gathering virtue, and so forth. And in order to do something like that, to be able to be generous, to be able to be ethical, we have to have patience. If we have the inability to sort of bear with some small kind of disagreement or small difficulty, then there's no way that we can engage in these kinds of activities like generosity and really practicing our ethics. So, when we have this kind of transformation of mind that creates more harmony, where we have less pride, we have less jealousy, we don't look down on others, we're able to be patient with them, we are happier right now. And we are also creating the causes that we experience a happier migration in the future. The more that we reduce those sorts of attitudes, I mean, competitiveness and jealousy and pride and malice and so forth, the more we are going to be in harmony with those around us. That leads to a happier kind of family. When we are happier ourselves, those directly around us are happier. And in turn, that leads to a sort of happier society. So we shouldn't think, oh, this is just the practice of the being of small scope. This isn't something that I need to do, but rather it is through this kind of practice, even if we hold ourselves as being most important and we see, oh, well, my side and my family is most important, we still recognize the value of not harming others and benefiting them as much as we can, because that is going to in turn benefit us. So if we abide in this way, if we're really grounded in that kind of Dharma, then we are creating the causes for our temporary happiness, of being happier in the here and now, as well as having a long term kind of benefit, a good rebirth in the future, and experiencing good causes as a result of this kind of activity. And so it really is dependent upon our mind to expand a little bit, to be more spacious and expansive, and be able to bear with whatever comes our way. If we are able to bear with some sort of small difficulty, small inconvenience, then we get better at being able to bear with whatever we encounter. And this in turn becomes the cause of our own happiness. And this is something that we can establish through our own experience. When we have fewer of these negative activities and emotions in our life, when we are less jealous and prideful and competitive and speak less harshly and don't lie and so forth, we are creating happiness in the here and now, as well as creating these kinds of excellent causes for the future. So, again, this isn't something to disregard, but really, Dharma is fundamentally, as this quote says, about benefit, future benefit, and happiness. And that begins with creating happiness in the here and now by eliminating those kinds of negative actions and emotions.
Oh yeah. Adi maloshana.
Mm.
Dar tembe sumba tarse. Siba kolo trije ne tila temba shiko ne sheba ke keba ko sora kelo keba ko se. Sumba da ngudu so payu ki kindenji tsula kange kokando siba kolo trije suju yeba se ngema tende agalia tende loso yodoa. Te peson chi de ge kasore. Tatayan je yoba te kardose lama lu yoba ne achende trabu ang chutembe kokando seda o tikan trishadwa Siba Kulu Piri Yobati Yinse. Dene Rangi se Ngaran Nima Jaga Chin to do so that. At the Cheton to Tujuna, Sanet and Jet or Kukap, Merson Java Kukap, Siba Kolu, you ever did Tongodoa. Ina ko parja the ya tomboche taye tunji yomarwa. Ina ya Siba Kolu remi cha kande tiki yobata namjunga zu pebe tira teta chikba ina mena takur sabde. Teta tuye medua. Gashi yobala te chita te yoba shende chua te ha konda samchide. Teta ya ko tunji zongu medua. Ne ta nyene sawar tawe tunji manzumbe. And she matosa ya tiba to chill loshana.
Mm. So here then to pick up in the text again, just as the teacher instructed, in ancient times there developed a custom of drawing a wheel of life in the entryway of the Sangha's temples, as well as appointing then monks or nuns there to describe and explain it. So here, as an example, even today, there is still a remaining example of this, a drawing of the Wheel of Life from the 5th century in the entryway of Cave 17 at Ajanta. So here it was either 66 or 68 that I had an opportunity to visit there and look at the drawings. The sort of conditions were not correct for me on my visit to be able to discern whether there was a wheel of life or not. And we'll see here that later on I had a traveler who went there and photographed it for me, but I didn't, when I made a visit, have the kind of conditions to view it up close.
Oh, yeah. So, you know, Kapchile, Titusa, and I don't go Shabashako, about never don't get on so. Archetos of Kisha, and they call Lam Tip, Archie, Abushi Capsua, Angaman to do Captain Acomaso, Charaya Abushi, and I like Kusho Asemba. And the Koran te chinche, I said they travel on Chuptimbe, Siba quality, Partos Lansha. In a Kosebu Medua, Trabuta, Tina, the low Manguchin Sagesoza, Joinche Sarah, remove the Sebu, in that Ako Siba Kolo Yimbata, the Hakoyatoa, so Judatilude, remove Sebu Mamata. Oh, remove Yamshapa. This on the Sebu shade to get the meadow. In a page Tula Kage, Ogando Siba Kolo drive so yabate, and a Kun Sanjedo, that earlier, Combakange Konda Siba Kolo Tigra, or de Tula Kangalia, Loseling Machagal and the Yodes, Sanjelia, and it parting and the deputy wall 2 years ago. Tula Kan ship to Jibe Siba Kolo, Parta Nyamdo, Temde Judo. Chari Shara, Hoyuji Sujun de la Tene Pege Kunde Sulakan Kogan Namso, Siba Kolo Drive, and a Sode Targep Shambodo, Kangaleti, Siba Kol Tigra, Kindune Sula, Kindu Kabako and it, Geshe Yangeko Sondo Sanje, Tedesco Loseling Samara. Kindu Namne Sula Kan Jemmy, Namla Tende Piri Sunday Tone. Shotemba Kelo Keba, Kovesu, as a matter of just Tarmeduser, Otima Lotion, Nelona.
So here in 1968, I had an opportunity to see this when I stayed in that region of India and visited that cave. So I was able to look at this drawing, and I wanted to determine what kind of drawing it was amongst the several different ways of drawing the sections of the Wheel of Life, but the conditions to view it clearly from up close were not available. Nevertheless, through an interested traveler who later went there at my request, so someone I knew was doing a pilgrimage pigeon had the kind of conditions like a camera and so forth to be able to photograph that drawing. So he went there at my request, and I was able to see photos of that drawing. But because the drawings in that cave had been there for so many years, again from the 5th century, they had degenerated and the wheel of life was not clearly discernible. So although we could tell like this is a wheel of life drawn at the front of this temple, discerning the sort of individual portions of it were not possible. So, although independence on the Indian custom, there is this widespread tradition of including a drawing of the Wheel of Life in the entryways of the Tibetan monastic temples. The custom of appointing a learned monk from the Sangha to explain to temple visitors the teaching from the viewpoint of the meaning of the symbolism in this picture did not, for the most part, spread. So we see that there is often, almost always, a wheel of life at the entrance of Tibetan monastic temples, but it doesn't seem that they held on to the tradition of having monks there to explain what it meant.
Oh yeah. Adi ma lo shan de da. Siba kolo piri chande sa. Siba kolo ri rawati remude de chande ma robs ro shegra. Oh, siba kolo de tewalia remu karite verse timu she chevese momba she chevese gora. She che phagwa shti gora. Ki delia. Phagwa de khane ne shedan she chimbo yenge tu tu chi da. ane dosha she chimbo yenge ane cha purungi ni khane tembe ji yore. Phagwa de khane cha chi da ane kar so re. Tu tu chi ya khane tembe shi yore kide. Dosha timu che phagwa de timu 당시 말을 받쳐주셔. 아니 주대 공부 쳐주셔. 그러나 자포는데 내 대자 쳐주셔. 셰시부에서 대 천재를 뛰라. 난 당시다 나 sabsanga rawa tuban simba diwange ngada ngasola chakba. 그러나 diwange shenla shenjole tawe kondo. 어 tisumde shicheje네 diwange lesawiora. 디왕게네 겨와다 멜로가 있어고네 겨와다 메겨와다 로마델레 강사요라 어제도 푸르니 가서래 푸르니 템베 비리키에서 로아링에 고야니 수기 싸와드 가르스나 데샤시다 이무숨레셔라 데샤다 시다니자 싸와 데샤시다니부터야 싸와 용사데 이모래 좋아해서 나 삼사 나의 내주 마셔봐 와게 라한테 컨디치 버데 내주 원에테 컨디 마셔봐세 라 여다한테 친질로든 좀봐 친질로든 좀봐 선자 원에테 마셔서 미시바스 맹다요라 나의 내주 원에테 마셔봐세 원에레 친질로든 좀봐 선자 몽바스 마릭바스 거라 원에테 마셔봐서 마릭바레스 어디부터 질로나 싸웠지 뭐냐. 이것도 좀 천바에 넣었을 때 질러서.
No. So, then turning to the symbols and the meanings of the drawing of the Wheel of Life. So here at the center, at the kind of hub in the very center of the Wheel of Life is a drawing of a pig, an animal that signifies ignorance. They are thought to sort of be predominated by ignorance. And issuing from its mouth are both a poisonous snake, which signifies hostility, and a pigeon, which signifies attachment. So these three mental poisons are the root cause determining how the environs and the bodies of the 5 types of living beings within cyclic existence. So here, again, at its center, we have these 3, the pig that signifies ignorance or the sort of lack of knowing. We could say nescience, a not understanding, not knowing. And from it then comes the poisonous snake signifying hostility and a pigeon, which signifies attachment. And so the root of both of those then is this sort of nescience or this ignorance regarding the way that the I exists, the nature of the I and the mine. And based upon not having correct understanding, one grasps at an I, and then based upon that gives rise to attachment for one's own side and hostility, animosity toward the other. So in addition, both attachment and hostility are shown to be emerging from their root, ignorance.
Oh yeah. Te tale tanda te wate doja timusum kogo chitira. Ta de tadel ramuka triver senasana. Te tala te tar le karna ni le se. Kabuchi da naburchi de kabuchi chi matudu nabuchi se dostido. Kana ni le se. Le karbu yandro anam jese. Saja kaburu chili yandro geti shavate. Nam je. Usum karu ge le sa de se. Tako le ora shenjago ange so le sa ro ke le de ro tome mariba nga sa nga ji kunela ane te nge le sa le ya ge ri de chala chawa pa ba da pheba tu ba la so le sa ya de le ke wa sa yo ra ka ru le sa de te ya mi ke chu bon ge ke le sa mi ke chu pa ba ke le sa ba la te ne ne tendro lada mili mili kewana titsungura lada mili kete tendro persi nam tendro liandro ge persi shitsani persi telia dawu abe nawa karbuda cheba kendo drove nawa sharwe tendro neso drova titsambata ase o tibatu chilana.
So around this center, we have that central circle with the three poisons, are the two pathways, white and black, which symbolize the experience of beings in the intermediate state. So living beings accumulate karma by the influence of any of the three mental poisons. So virtuous karma that results in rebirth and cyclic existence is motivated by the two poisons of ignorance and attachment to the self. So here we see that virtue or non-virtue occurs due to these various poisons. And virtue, for example, out of craving, out of grasping or attachment, we then do work that is beneficial, that doesn't cause harm to others, and thereby one takes rebirth in the sort of happier realms. So as it describes here, and then non-virtuous karma is motivated by all three of the mental poisons. And in the drawing, the people moving upward on a white path symbolize how, at the time of being reborn in the happy realms of humans and gods, due to virtuous karma of abstaining from the 10 non-virtuous karmic actions, the beings of the intermediate state have an experience of going upward, guided by a white light like that of the moon. So here, these white and black paths that encircle the very central circle indicate the kind of virtuous or non-virtuous paths that beings can take from the intermediate state to a future rebirth.
Oh yeah. Ta meke wa chu le la te de. Nyawa da yida. Tondro le ke wa le de sa na. Tondro le ke wa na se. Tondro meke wa chu le ga ke tondro ke shin na. Ane ro tondro parsi ba nam la. Tondro parsi te akura tondro ke chira. Dine shi ke wa shime ke wa ngone malam be paru te ya. Ke wa chi chu ya re te parsi ba se to par ki si ba. Dine mi member che phajo de ke wa lang ju che. Ini parulia, kawaje na te so dabura se na wala chi sha yilu se ra. Inde dile parsi ba se ra. Parsi ba namla myuna do surdo droge. Myuna che na na bura sha che ne ma turdu ma doge be na wa sha wi che ra. Che de nya war chen gen she yina. Lengen je so ro we ka she le jigna rab tin de yogu se ra. Tende kasere chiten droyan jina chiri yoba de chaba yese ma nakure se kone tulu ma tawara kapchen dongere tisha do adi te tar tinti bose tendro ya lamga kabu chika dongere chita pajo nabu chin dongere ni hora mige chubun chutim sune ada mele droya pajo de nge sosum droya de chaba yese ra ane, iba do chilam na. 야 로샨디라 되다.
So, here, this is fairly straightforward, so I'll just be reading. But again, non-virtuous karma is motivated by all three mental poisons, and the intermediate state beings destined for the hell, hungry ghost, or animal realms, due to the 10 non-virtuous karmic actions, experience going downward in darkness. The beings depicted here are being led by frightful hell demons. So here, when it comes to the intermediate state being, after one has passed from one existence and before one takes another rebirth, you have this kind of intermediate state. And that intermediate state being has a mental body that takes on the form of wherever they are going to take rebirth. And so here, when it comes to those sort of beings who have engaged in virtue, they will be going on this white path, sort of upward in a light way. Whereas those who are destined for lower rebirths due to the 10 non-virtuous karmic actions experience going downward in darkness, as if they're being led by, in its depiction, the frightful hell demons. So these two paths, dark and light, represent the paths that beings who are going to be born in samsara can take.
오야. 다 데이터를 내 남가 가우치다 나부시 니 총사. 다 데이터를 가려서나. 데이터를 잠이 나 티그를 겹쳐 창가 소셔라. 냐와제 이다제 던루제 미제 아제 텐데코 가가래서 가서세. 아토스나 하여베세 미토스나 미여베세 가셔나 던루여베세 가셔 냐와 샤워라데 메타게 텐데 요티셔라 티시오라. 데이터를 잠이가 요하다 매와 요하스나 티시오라 하튼 줘야 여버터서 미다 잘라다 도서 키야 여버터 요하스라 아 사자다 생도라 베타셔테나 매와스라 싱글라브르 텐데 연스고라 어디 요하다 매요에세 잠이 나를 요하다 매요에 롱제자 내진지 된다 롱제자 지대 코라 대서르체 롱제바보 주지 심장 좋아 링에 비리기세 롱제자된 롱제바보더라 롱제자된 내진지 된 사지다서 저서거라 롱제바보서는 가사 경계들아 될 롱제게데 링에 비리기 롱제바 주지 심장서거라 Draw ring a pirikinis, draw ring at the tear, Tanya Yida Tenrutozo. Let a Yomombe, one get quar, Corona, Corsen draw ring and draw Anga, yes, Titigora, Nyawata, Yida Tenruta, draw Mida Lada Cheb and draw Nasera. Hala Lada Lama and Yesuchena, draw real to do, any real truth. Guinness or Tender Dramadashe. The Dado Tunge. Getungeda, Gure Tungeda, Kaban Duji Getunge, Yonju Samba Yeneso, Tesula Kene, Yawayeda Tundu Mela Soba Kene, and Kashake, Tunge Tunge, Kashake, Jure Tewa, Kaban Duji Tunge, Tunge Tunges, Tunge Monetra, and Jure Tunges, Tanda Tewa de Chunatia, Mabachane Tunge Ngo Judura. Tira, Kaban Duji Tungesana, let a Yomombe Shawashenge. 풍부들의 개반도 주세요. 소소라 매바세 내가 nhóm 샤와체기 풍부가 요로 어떠줄래? 개반도 주기 통해서라. 어디 봐도 실로는 돼서.
So, around this, in an image divided into 5 sections, are drawings of 5 different kinds of beings. The living beings who are the animate inhabitants that use the inanimate worldly habitat that is for their use. So here we have these 5 sections in the sort of center of the ring that depict then the way in which the sort of births in which one can take rebirth. They depict then the beings who are animate and the inhabitants who move and go around, as well as the kind of inanimate world, the sort of ground, the various objects within that are part of the environment they inhabit. When you pass through cyclic existence due to karma and the afflictions, you do so as one of these 5 types of beings: hell beings, hungry ghosts, animals, humans, and gods, or 6 types when you divide the gods into gods and demigods. So here, um, then within this picture, you have the depiction, usually of 5 different types of beings, or either that or 6, that illustrate then kind of what you will experience. So these sections also illustrate how, as one of these beings, you experience the suffering of pain, the suffering of change, and the suffering of pervasive conditioning. So the suffering of pain is what we all kind of recognize as suffering, that's sort of real suffering. And then there is the suffering of change, in that as much as we engage in something, it is in the nature that it will change. And thereby, it's not really in the nature of pleasure. Something that it has been experienced as pleasurable will become in the nature of suffering. And then there is the suffering of pervasive conditioning, as in these contaminated, appropriated aggregates that we have taken up due to karma and the afflictions are thereby in the nature of suffering, in that they are controlled by our karma and afflictions. And so this illustration then shows how it is that as one of these types of beings, you experience these various types of suffering. That's what this part of the wheel is depicting. And so I guess yeah, so we are out of time for today, so we will stop there. Tukche na Genla.
Thank you, Rinpoche. Thank you for caring for us so kindly with these teachings. And Katrina, thank you for your beautiful translations. For those who are watching online, we hope to see you again next Monday at 8 a.m. Pacific. We'll end with some dedication prayers.
May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and those spiritual friends who practice it, have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of Lobsang's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. Iram Gururana Mandalakam Niryatayami. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore.
Sadawa Jema Jeyang.
Recording stop.